vision or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jackie, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 14th issue of the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Trump's cuts to Medicaid keep getting more harmful, by Lisa Jarvis. When Congress passed sweeping Medicaid cuts as part of President Trump's signature tax bill last year, the headline numbers were grim. Some 7.5 million people were expected to lose coverage due to changes to the public health insurance program. Now, an already bad situation for Americans' health is getting worse. Seemingly at every opportunity, the Trump administration is taking a harsher approach to implementing that policy than anticipated or required by law. That could mean bigger headaches for state Medicaid agencies, more people needlessly losing insurance, and eroded access to care for everyone. A large chunk of Trump's nearly $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts will come from the introduction of new work requirements for the program's nearly 68 million enrollees, which go into effect next January 1. Able-bodied adults will need to prove that they have put in 80 hours each month working, going to school, training for a job, or volunteering. Putting that policy into practice was always going to be a headache. From the moment Trump signed his one big, beautiful bill into law last July, states have been scrambling to make sure their systems are ready to verify everyone's insurance eligibility. Yet, they were building those systems without a blueprint. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services had relied on its general thinking to states, but needed time to sketch out the exact details. A lengthy document recently released by CMS threw that already difficult process into disarray. The law exempts people who are medically frail from the work requirement, and states had come up with plans to identify those enrollees. The expectation was that most states would rely on a list of conditions that would automatically qualify someone for an exemption, a list that could be further backed up by insurance claims data. But CMS decided to go a step further and ask people to prove their medical condition affects their ability to work. The stricter stance was a real surprise to the states, says Adriana McIntyre, a health policy expert at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. If states have to rush to change their systems, the chance of errors goes up. And in this case, the stakes are high. Errors mean people not getting coverage or losing coverage. The proposed rules aren't just hard to put into practice. They fail to capture the complexity of people's lives. For some, access to regular care for a chronic condition, whether physical or mental, is what allows them to work. For others, the onset of a serious condition, a stage when steady care is crucial, could complicate their ability to work consistently. Health policy experts offered a few examples of people who are particularly vulnerable to losing coverage. Someone with HIV who is healthy enough to work, so long as they have access to their medication, could be at risk, as could someone newly diagnosed with cancer who needs radiation therapy. They're technically able to work, McIntyre says, but they also need to be able to make those doctor's appointments, and their oncologist may not be able to work around their McDonald's schedule, right? Yet, even those who make it through the eligibility gauntlet could find their access to care diminished. States facing a Medicaid-induced budget crunch have spent the past year looking for ways to cut back on spending. Several have said that they will no longer pay for popular GLP-1 medicines, and others are considering reducing coverage for optional services, services that likely don't feel so optional to the people who need them. For example, states are weighing cuts to in-home care, a change that could mean the difference between a disabled child being able to live with their parents or being forced to move to a residential care facility. And some people will find providers a lot harder to come by. The Medicaid cuts are a gut punch to already fragile healthcare systems, particularly in the rural hospitals and urban safety net hospitals that disproportionately serve people with public insurance. The Health Policy Research Organization, KFF, estimated last year that rural areas alone could see $137 billion fewer Medicaid dollars in the next decade. But the situation could get even worse. In recent weeks, the government proposed changes to a wonky area of regulation that allows state Medicaid agencies to boost payments to providers in managed care. These so-called state-directed payments have been used since 2016 to help close coverage gaps, say by raising payments to pediatricians in a bid to increase the number who accept Medicaid in an area. Lawmakers sought to rein in those payments, which had grown substantially in recent years under the One Big Beautiful Bill. Yet, like the work requirements, CMS's overhaul goes far beyond the letter of the law by eventually cutting off a mechanism through which some 70% of those dollars flow, explains Leonardo Coelho, an expert on Medicaid policy at Georgetown University. The results so far have already been dramatic. Cuts to state-directed payments are 3 times as large as originally anticipated, some $515 billion over a decade. State Medicaid programs might try to reroute some of those dollars, adding to their overall administrative nightmare created by all these late-breaking rule changes. But many will fall short, Coelho says. Those cuts will ripple out to hospitals' bottom lines, further destabilizing these already strained systems. Collectively, the effect won't just be felt by people who rely on Medicaid. If financial pressures force hospitals to discontinue services, put off investments and upgrades, or even shut down altogether, that will affect everyone who might need care. Although the broader changes to Medicaid can't be unwound, their implementation doesn't have to be this punitive. There is still time for CMS to revise its approach, albeit not so much time. But if the changes are left as is, the consequences will fall first on the most vulnerable Americans, and they won't end there. They will weaken parts of the healthcare system that serve all Americans. This is from the Bloomberg Opinion. In Everybody's column, Letters from Our Readers, data centers do not offer lasting benefits. The former Tonawanda Coke site is one of Western New York's prime redevelopment opportunities. A brownfield with abundant nearby water access, rail connections, and major electrical infrastructure already in place. On the surface, it seems like a logical home for a data center. But a project of this scale deserves more than quick approval and ribbon cutting. It deserves a clear understanding of its long-term impact on the community. Data centers are marketed as clean, quiet, high-tech investments. What's less discussed is that they create very few permanent jobs and have short technological lifespans. A facility built today may be functionally obsolete within a decade. Think of how fast your phone becomes outdated. Technology may soon favor placing such centers in near-Earth orbit. If Erie County and Tonawanda offer tax breaks or subsidized power, the public could end up supporting a project that doesn't support us back, and we may be left with another empty building suitable only for indoor pickleball. More importantly, dedicating enormous amounts of Niagara region electrical capacity to a single data center raises a big question. Is this the best use of our hydropower advantage? Before Tonawanda commits one of its most strategic sites to a low-employment, high-resource facility, residents deserve a full societal impact study. Redevelopment is essential, but it must be thoughtful, transparent, and grounded in the long view, not driven by profiteering, bandwagons, or haste. By John Diebold, Buffalo. Data center will be bad for Tonawanda. I'm writing this letter in response to the data center being planned for the town of Tonawanda. The evidence shows data centers create temporary jobs which consist of construction work. Actual employees equal one job per 5,000 square feet. What kind of tax breaks will the center receive? Since these centers heavily rely on massive electricity and water usage, these costs will be heaped on the residents. Another issue is the chronic exposure to the mechanical noise. This leads to sleep disturbances, elevated stress, and cardiovascular events. The noise will cause disruption to local wildlife and natural migration patterns. I urge the town of Tonawanda to put the well-being of its residents before a company that will do more harm than good. Diane Ellis, Tonawanda. Factory farming has human costs. Lawmakers are now investigating toxic gas emissions from animal farming, including ammonia pollution that threatens nearby communities. The Bureau of Investigative Journalism, February 17th. For residents living near these facilities, this isn't new. It's daily life. We often talk about factory farming in terms of animals or climate, but the human cost is just as real. Families are breathing contaminated air so the rest of us can consume cheap meat and dairy. This raises an uncomfortable question. How cheap is cheap if others are paying with their health? If we value clean air and public health, we must confront the true cost of industrial animal agriculture and start supporting food systems that don't harm communities in the process. Bob Lovejoy, Buffalo. Not looking forward to America 250. 50 years ago, I was an optimistic 20-year-old looking forward to what life had to offer and the upcoming bicentennial celebration of our nation's existence. We had gotten through the Watergate scandal aftermath and ended our involvement in Vietnam. This nation, although divided, felt destined to heal the wounds of those events. I recall a whole lot of enthusiasm and pride for America's upcoming birthday party with the parade of tall ships, fireworks, concerts, and an epic street party in my old East Side neighborhood. Maybe it's just me, but the 250th anniversary doesn't feel quite the same. In 1976, Gerald Ford, a likable guy, was our president, and unlike our current White House occupant, tried his best to unify the country. The Republican majority in Congress today stands mute while American citizens are gunned down by government agents, people are swept up and detained in what seem like concentration camps, and our civil rights are slowly allowed to erode. The upcoming July 4 anniversary seems less of a celebration and more like a fight to hold on to democracy. More than ever, may God bless America. Daniel Glowicki, Hamburg. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. New York's Amtrak rates are too high. On average, 3 daily round-trip Amtrak trains travel between Niagara Falls, Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse, with about as many empty seats as a Boeing 737. Yet these empty seats are the most expensive way an individual can travel between any of these cities. Amtrak's Maple Leaf and Empire service are state-supported routes wherein New York provides financial support to make up the difference between what is collected via fares and what the service costs to provide. In return, New York approves the pricing schedule for consumers. The prices for these trips have been too expensive for years. Consider the state-supported Lincoln service, which runs from Chicago to St. Louis, Missouri. That's a 284-mile journey and has fares starting at $25. The cheapest ticket to travel 146 miles from downtown Buffalo to Syracuse is $29. Fares across upstate New York can be more than twice as expensive on a per-mile basis than other state-supported routes, with higher demand that travel between more populous metropolitan areas. Western and Central New York legislators should press the state to approve lower base fares to make Amtrak more price competitive to driving. Lowering prices likely would not require changes in law, only pressure on the executive branch to act. Low ridership between these cities means that the state would need minimal increases in operating support to offset low fare revenue. Lower fares would create a price floor for travel across these cities, incentivizing travelers to use Amtrak and offering transportation alternatives to all consumers. John O'Brien, Buffalo. NCAR provides essential data. As a constituent who values practical solutions that keep our communities safe and thriving, I urge Representative Nick Langworthy to support funding for the National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR. It is essential that Congress use and protect its constitutional authority to appropriate federal funds, ensuring that taxpayer investments continue to deliver real, local benefits. The Trump administration has been trying to dismantle NCAR, even though the center's work is a cornerstone of the weather services that residents, businesses, and local governments rely on every day. NCAR's forecasting and early warnings that help families plan, school districts make decisions, and emergency managers stage resources efficiently. The benefits reach our fields, forests, and neighborhoods. Farmers use NCAR-informed tools for planting schedules, irrigation decisions, and pest management, helping to stabilize yields and reduce costs. Wildfire behavior analysts enhances the ability of firefighters and land managers to anticipate fire spread, protect communities, and allocate crews and equipment where they're most needed. Flood forecasting improves the timing of evacuations, the positioning of sandbags and barriers, and the resilience of local infrastructure. Congress should continue to fund agencies that provide vital climate and weather research, such as NCAR, because their insights directly translate into services by forecasters, emergency responders, utilities, and transportation planners. The results are faster, more accurate decisions when minutes matter. I believe sustained, predictable support for NCAR will strengthen New York 23's preparedness, agriculture, and public safety. I respectfully ask Langworthy to uphold Congress's appropriations role and keep these essential programs robust. Andrew Hartley, East Aurora. We got mail. 23 letters were received this week. Number 1 topic, Tonawanda Coke. Number 2, Trump decisions. Number 3, environment. Number 4, economy and high prices. And number 5, local issues. In the My View column, Bills fans need to take their seats, by Larry Zielinski of Elma, who thinks Bills games are just as enjoyable while seated. As we all look forward to the opening of the new Bills Stadium, I'm on a one-man crusade to make this a great experience for all fans by asking people to actually sit in those expensive seats they just paid for. About the time that the Bills became competitive again, fans began standing during the entire game. Bills fans don't just stand for important third down plays. We stand for kickoffs, extra points, and punts. Sometimes we even stand for corgi races at halftime. I am blessed to be able to attend the games with my daughters and grandkids, and their experience is ruined by not being able to see anything on the field. While I understand the enthusiasm, it ruins the experience for countless loyal fans, short fans, kids, older fans, and even average-sized adults who just don't want to stand for more than 3 hours. This does not occur in the other NFL stadiums I've visited. I've been to road games over the years, and people in other stadiums are much more courteous to the people around them. 2 years ago in Detroit, we attended a fantastic game between 2 top contenders and were surrounded by Lions fans who remained seated throughout the entire game. Last year, we went to that disappointing loss in Atlanta where Falcons fans enjoyed one of their best wins in years. They remained seated despite their excitement. My son and I have attended baseball games all over the country. Fans remain seated until the last out in the last inning in every ballpark we have been to. Even rowdy soccer fans have been restricted. The United Kingdom's Sports Grounds Safety Authority had banned standing, but now limits it to licensed designated areas that meet specific criteria. Each seat has an independent waist-high rail for safety. Why are Bills games different? We went to London to see the Bills face the Jaguars and sat next to another Bills fan who decided to stand. He told the people around him, "This is what we do in Buffalo." The fans and the ushers were not amused. When he refused to remain seated, he was escorted from the stadium. The reason we are all an outlier is because the Bills organization has allowed this to become part of the culture here. The Bills emphasize team culture. Fans have their own culture. The next time they send out one of their fan surveys, I would be interested in responses to the question, would you prefer to stand the entire game or watch the game from your seats? All season ticket holders are spending a fortune on seat licenses in the new stadium, on top of a substantial increase in the actual ticket price. I'm happy to do it despite the price, as Bills football has become part of my family's culture, now spanning 4 generations. As we open the beautiful new home of the Bills, we have an opportunity to establish a new, better fan experience. People need to be courteous and sit in their seats. We used to smoke in the stadium. We used to have unruly fan problem caused by too much drinking at the games. The bills helped change that behavior for the better. We can make this improvement as well as a community. Thanks to the entire Bills organization for what is now a class operation, with this exception. Rivera for State Senate. Between two excellent choices, a slight edge goes to the more progressive candidate. There isn't much daylight between the policy positions of John Rivera and Jeremy Zellner, the two men vying to be the Democratic candidate for New York State Senate 61st District. But their backgrounds in Western New York politics and the way they got to this contest are cause for discussion. Zellner is currently the incumbent. He won the seat in a February special election, replacing current Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan, who had previously held it. Had there been no primary opponent, Zellner would likely have coasted to another victory in November, as no Republican seems to be running. But he does have an opponent in the June 23rd primary, Rivera, who is currently New York State Assemblyman 149th District. It's a tough choice for voters, and a tough choice for this page. Both men are well qualified, likable, and seem determined to make life better for New Yorkers, especially in the areas of health care and housing. The most we can do is award an edge to Rivera, largely for his record in the Assembly, his special attention to crucial issues like the deadly prevalence of lead paint in local housing stock, and the likelihood of his being a slightly more progressive voice in the legislature. But make no mistake, Zellner also has the potential to get things done as a lawmaker. His connections are enviable. He served as Democratic Commissioner for the Board of Elections from 2017 until stepping down this year, and he's been chair of the Erie County Democratic Committee since 2012. Under his leadership, Democrats have done well in Western New York, with the party sweeping leadership positions in Amherst and getting elected to assembly seats that had been previously held by Republicans. Good government groups have questioned Zellner's holding both the party chairmanship and the Board of Elections position simultaneously for as many years as he did. That's not to say he didn't do a good job. Addressing such challenges as the COVID-19 pandemic, the conversion to electronic voting and polling tablets, broader mail-in ballot access, and the county-wide implementation of early voting. Though he recused himself from the committee vote that chose him as the Democratic candidate to replace Ryan in February, it's hard to see how his insider status didn't give him a boost. His endorsements include nods from Governor Kathy Hochul and County Executive Mark Poloncarz, good friends to have. As the son of a longtime Buffalo Common Council member, David Rivera, John Rivera isn't exactly an outsider. He worked in the offices of Representative Brian Higgins, took a detour into banking, and then returned to public service, first at the Erie County Legislature, then working as a special assemblyman. After leaving banking, Rivera returned to public service, first at the Erie County Legislature, then working as special assistant to the Commissioner of Public Works in Erie County. He was elected to the Assembly in 2021 and was the first Latino serving west of New York City in that body. The News editorial board endorsed him in his 2020 primary, a three-way race, citing his experience in the private and public sectors, as well as his forward-looking approaches to the issues confronting Buffalo and Western New York. Rivera's accomplishments in the Assembly include securing funding for a long list of community projects in Buffalo, as well as sponsoring and co-sponsoring legislation related to lead paint AI regulation, childcare, and, in an amended bill passed this session, increasing diversity in the state judiciary. Zellner also has a good legislative record, given the short time he has served in the state Senate. He signed on to important environmental protection and utility regulation bills, as well as a co-sponsored legislation that bars former Western Regional Off-Track Betting Corp. Executives from joining the board of directors for 5 years. This was clearly intended to prevent further corruption at the publicly owned gambling agency and was enacted as part of the state budget. In giving the nod to Rivera, it must be clearly stated that these are two excellent candidates, and the 61st District will be well served regardless of who prevails. In another voice, reform. The scaffold law reform should be the next mission. By Elizabeth Crowley. Albany doesn't hand out wins like this often. Governor Kathy Hochul just defeated one of the most powerful special interests in state government, the New York State Trial Lawyers Association, to deliver historic auto insurance relief for millions of New Yorkers. Next, she should take them on again to reform the scaffold law so we can make building everything from housing to schools to public transit projects more affordable. Mundane as it may seem, there's no doubt that auto insurance reform stands tall among the many wins for New Yorkers in this year's budget. For decades, staged crashes and outright fraud alone have been inflating everyone's premiums by as much as $300 per year. New York's affordability crisis has been quietly fueled by a legal system that rewards frivolous lawsuits, invites fraud and abuse, and pushes legal costs 67% beyond the national average. Nowhere is this more destructive than in the construction insurance, where the scaffold law drives premiums to levels up to 500% higher than other states. The numbers are irrefutable. In most of the country, insurance accounts for roughly 2% to 4% of total construction costs. In New York, the scaffold law drives that figure to 10%. This is an invisible tax on every building that goes up in this state, costs that flow directly into higher rents, stalled affordable housing developments, and ballooning price tags on critical public infrastructure. The root cause is a liability framework that emboldens bad actors. Under the scaffold law, contractors can be held fully responsible for damages regardless of their actual share of fault, the same kind of legal loophole that ambulance chasers and third-party litigation funders have exploited for years. One simple reform, moving to a comparative negligence model where liability is shared based on fault, as every other state in America already does, would unlock billions in savings currently hemorrhaging into avoidable insurance premiums. For decades, the New York State Trial Lawyers Association has killed every serious attempt at construction insurance reform in Albany. Hochul just proved she's the first governor with the courage to beat them. Now, it's time to finish the job. Elizabeth Crowley is President and CEO of the Building Trades Employers Association. The Scammer Almost Got Me Before My First Cup of Coffee by Susan Estrich. I woke up early to catch the latest news on the election results, only to find that the first text message I saw was not a news alert from Maine, but a warning from Apple customer support. Someone in Moscow was trying to access my Apple account to make a $329.49 purchase on the AliExpress marketplace. The transaction would be processed within 80 minutes unless I called Apple customer support at 1-877-603-5084. That is obviously not the real number for Apple customer support. I've included it as a warning, like the rest of this column. I should have checked the number, but I didn't even stop for coffee. My son recently had his identity hacked, just what I didn't need to start my day. So I called. There were 2 more charges pending, one from Mexico for drugs and alcohol, and another from Moscow. Did I want to block those as well? Obviously, I did. What my phony Apple representative did next was the dead giveaway. He guided me on how to download an application that would give him, StephenParker99@gmail.com, remote access to my iPhone so he could steal all my credentials. I got it by that point, and I challenged him for scamming me, and he fought back. And I did what I should have done first, which was to Google Stephen Parker Apple scam. Here is a summary of what I got from various sources. Steve Parker is a common alias used by cyber criminals in phishing scams that impersonate Apple support. These scammers send fake text messages or emails claiming your Apple ID has been compromised, providing a fraudulent phone number for an agent named Steve Parker who pretends to help you secure your account but actually attempts to steal your credentials. Here is how the scam works. Initial warning. You receive an urgent text or email alert claiming unauthorized activity, an iCloud breach, or an unpaid Apple Store charge. The hook. The message instructs you to call a specific phone number or click a link to cancel the request or verify your identity. Impersonation. If you call the number, the scammer, often posing as Steve Parker or a similar fraud department consultant, builds trust by providing seemingly legitimate security advice. Phishing. The scammer directs you to a fake website designed to look exactly like the legitimate Apple login page to steal your username, password, or financial details. I never got as far as the Apple login page, but he did send me to the App Store to download a program that would have given him remote access to my phone. Even without caffeine, that spelled scam. What's scary to me about this story is how close I got to falling for the phishing. How close. Phishing makes it sound innocent. It isn't. It's fraud, and it's hard to believe there is no way to regulate it better. Spam risk. My phone screams all day long. Answering and saying, "Please don't call again," doesn't work. Neither does not answering. If my phone can recognize spam for what it is, why can't it give you the option of blocking it altogether? What is being done to protect people from Steve Parker and punish the cyber criminals for their fraud and attempted fraud? How could I be so stupid as to almost fall for it? Are they really that good? Something must be done to stop them. In the meantime, beware of text messages giving you numbers to call for customer support that are not the ones on the official website. Check, don't call. If in doubt, call the real number. Never give remote access to your phone. When you realize that's what they're looking for, hang up and report it. This is from the Creators Syndicate. Amid isolation, people need others to help fight loneliness. By Frama Harup. Ashley, North Dakota, is a small farming town where the local diet leans hard on sausage, deep-fried chicken, and strudel. It has something of a medical center, but the nearest trauma hospital able to handle the most serious injuries is almost 4 hours away in Fargo. Yet the elders in McIntosh County, with Ashley as its county seat, frequently live into their 90s, and sometimes beyond. It had the highest proportion of people 85 and older in the country. Doesn't make sense until you see why it does. Stress levels are low. The farmers pursue a lifetime of physical exercise. When they retire in town, they still mow their small lawns and grow vegetables in the backyard. The numbers may be skewed by the many young people who leave town for economic opportunity in bigger places, but they're hard to dismiss. A big factor in this longevity, researchers found, was social connection. Every morning, the old men would gather at the Dakota Family Restaurant for coffee and breeze shooting. The women had their own table. The cafe is where the networking takes place, the county's director of social services said. If somebody doesn't show up for coffee, it will cause a lot of chatter, and someone will check on them. The pattern repeats itself across the northern plains. The most recent National Vital Statistics report lists the state for the highest life expectancy at birth. Number 1 is Hawaii, followed by Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Minnesota, Rhode Island, Utah, and New Hampshire. What these very diverse places have in common are relatively strong social infrastructures. A New York psychiatrist, known for running group sessions, would tell his patients, "You don't need me, you need friends." He'd put together people with little in common by age, ethnicity, and income level. Forced at first to air their angst before absolute strangers, the group members developed fast friendships that flourished decades after official therapy stopped. Loneliness has been declared an epidemic, leading to sickness and self-harm, and rightly so. The pandemic deepened isolation, but the shrinking personal ties began well before. Robert Putnam's 2000 book, Bowling Alone, documented an ongoing collapse of American community. Recent research found that from 2003 to 2022, face-to-face socializing among American men fell by about 30%. But for teenagers, it shrunk 45%. Email, texting, and posting have not replaced in-person socializing. And the result appears to be increased depression, especially among teenagers. And if their communication swims in anger-provoking social media feeds, small wonder so many are drowning in despair. Are there remedies? Several cities run activities fairs where attendees can look over groups to join. Interests can be books, oil painting, choral singing, cooking, whatever. We now read of adult sleepaway camps designed to spark new friendships. It's a bit of a shame that these encounters seem more mechanical than the simple act of saying hi to the neighbor taking out the garbage at the same time. But let's give them a try. The early 19th century French aristocrat Alexis de Tocqueville noted Americans' fondness for joining associations, political, neighborhood, labor. He famously wrote, "Nothing in my view deserves more attention than the intellectual and moral associations in America." And in many ways, they were superior to the social groups in old Europe, largely rooted in fossilized class distinctions. Americans, unplug your monitors, open the door to the fresh spring air, and strike up a conversation. People need people. You too. From the Creators Syndicate. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Want AI governance? Then it's time to unleash some crackpot schemes. By Kevin Frazier of the Fulcrum. AI is unpopular, and nearly 1 billion people use ChatGPT. AI is destroying jobs, and fields predicted to have been eliminated by AI, like radiology, continue to grow and leverage the technology to improve their work. AI is wrecking the environment, and state officials are learning from hyperscalers how to run the grid more efficiently. A black or white conception of AI promises to either deny its benefits or exacerbate its shortcomings. Yet there's no easy way to ensure a proper balancing of AI's promises and perils. While every major AI CEO is pledged to maximize the benefits and mitigate the risks, they've left out the details of how to do so. It's unlikely they or anyone will ever have such a definite plan. But if we want to avoid repeating what we did with nuclear power, locking a technology away and letting its best uses go unrealized, we need bold ideas from outside the rooms where AI policy currently gets written. We need crackpot schemes. Consider Social Security. Most Americans, asked who we should thank for it, would name FDR. The better answer is a doctor in Long Beach, California. In 1933, he wrote a letter to the editor proposing a $200 monthly pension for every citizen over 60, funded by a sales tax, with one catch. Recipients had to spend the money within 30 days. 2 goals, 1 scheme. Support the elderly, sustain a Depression-era economy. The idea caught fire. Clubs formed across the country, 2.2 million members strong. 10 million Americans signed petitions. By 1935, a majority of the country backed it. The plan never became law. Critics called it a crackpot scheme. But the Social Security system we have today is unimaginable without that op-ed from a doctor with minimal policy chops or political clout, but plenty of experience seeing people struggle to achieve financial security in their golden years. The best policies often come from unexpected places. Now, consider the policy challenges posed by AI. The Bureau of Labor Statistics projects a 3.1% job growth by 2035. Forecasters at Metacalculus project a 1.4 loss. Expert forecasters also expect unemployment for recent college graduates to hit 13.5% in the near future, with underemployment climbing to nearly 60%. Nobody knows for certain how this economic transition will play out. We are entering a volatile decade, and the people most exposed to it are the people with the least say in how it is governed. AI must be developed for us and by us if it's going to earn our trust. People support what they help build. As of now, there are few clear mechanisms for people to share their perspective on what they need to feel like AI is a net positive for their well-being and the well-being of their community. That needs to change. Here are a few of the crackpot schemes I've heard about when talking to everyday Americans eager to know that AI progress does not have to come at the expense of average Joes and Janes. First, a mandatory national service program with civil and military tracks for Americans between 17 and 19. It would signal that the country values young people's judgment at exactly the moment AI is making judgment more valuable than ever. It would build the interpersonal experience no model can replicate. It would help revive the civic glue that holds this country together. Second, recurring citizen assemblies at the local, state, and federal levels that provide a representative set of Americans with the chance to share their viewpoints in a calm, deliberative fashion. Polls focused on likely voters may hold sway with political campaigns, but do little to help guide actual policymaking. Gathering people in a room to discuss tangible, specific policies and related trade-offs may bolster the ability of politicians to plan for and respond to many different possible futures. You may regard these as crackpot schemes with no odds of passing. Good. The doctor's pension plan was wrong on the numbers, wrong on the mechanism, and wrong on the funding. It was also the most important policy proposal of the decade because it forced a country that had decided old age was a private problem to admit it was a public one. Your AI proposal does not have to be right. It has to be loud enough to make the wrong answer indefensible. Now, share yours. Kevin Frazier is an adjunct professor of Delaware law and an affiliated scholar of emerging technology and constitutional law at St. Thomas University College of Law. In the Buffalo Next section under real estate, why Western New York is among the top markets for home sellers by David Robinson. If you're selling your house in the Buffalo-Niagara region, you're sitting in the catbird seat. With so few homes for sale, sellers in the Buffalo-Niagara region hold some of the strongest bargaining hands among the nation's biggest metro areas, a pair of recent reports found. Mostly, it's a matter of supply and demand. And locally, it's more of a case where there just isn't nearly enough supply. Slightly under 1,400 homes were for sale during April, according to the latest data from the Buffalo-Niagara Association of Realtors. Despite an 8% increase in new listings compared with last year. That is 44% fewer homes than were for sale in April of 2019. While metro areas such as Rochester, Buffalo, and Chicago aren't booming or overheating, they are still markets where sellers generally hold more negotiating power than their counterparts in many Pacific Northwest and Southwest markets today, said Lance Lambert, the CEO of Housing Market Research from Resi Club. Generally speaking, housing markets where inventory, i.e. active listings, has returned to pre-pandemic 2019 levels have experienced weaker home price growth or outright declines over the past 47 months, Lambert wrote in a report. Conversely, housing markets where inventory remains far below pre-pandemic 2019 levels have generally speaking, experienced more resilient home price growth over the past 47 months. That dovetails with a separate Bankrate.com report that ranked Buffalo Niagara as the 5th best sellers market among the nation's 100 biggest metro areas, based on factors such as the number of homes for sale and how fast they're selling. Buffalo ranked 16th 4 years ago, an indication of how the local market has continued to tilt in favor of the sellers. The new developments coming in the suburbs include projects that are popping up across the Buffalo Niagara region. The bills gear up to cut the ribbon on the new stadium, and in personal finance, why most people think tipping has gotten out of hand. Gratuities. Most people think tipping has gotten out of hand, a survey finds, by Betty Lynn Fisher from USA Today. In a recent survey by Pop Menu, more than 3 out of 4 people, or 78%, said they believe that tipping practices have become ridiculous. 44% say they're tipping less this year than last year. Consumers aren't shy about expressing their tip fatigue online and on social media sites. I can't enjoy a weekend without at least 5 prompts to tip for doing absolutely nothing, one user on Reddit said about tipping fatigue. The anxiety that comes from this false pressure to tip a percentage on every bill is ludicrous. What have we gotten to that every place we go to is requesting a tip? A user on TikTok asked, while venting that someone taking her order was requesting a gratuity. There wasn't much service that was happening. It was just basic, she said. People feel that tipping has become maybe ubiquitous and that now we're being asked to tip for everything all the time, even for things that we didn't feel were customary or normal, Pop Menu CEO Brendan Sweeney said. Pop Menu, which is a restaurant tech company, has surveyed customers about tipping for more than 5 years. Tipping increased during and after the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown era, when the hospitality industry was hurting and consumers started leaving tips for takeout or tipping more as a warm and fuzzy feeling. But then I think we got to a point where it was like, wait, is this still an emergency? Is it still we're helping people? At the same time, people are really feeling the pinch of inflation, he said. And more digital register systems at businesses have the tipping screen built into the software, Sweeney said. Still, Sweeney said guilt tipping, or feeling guilted into leaving a tip to avoid the awkward thing, is a thing. When a digital screen asked for a tip, 59% of the respondents said they felt compelled to leave one. But that's down from 66% in September of 2025. And the share of people who say they tip on a weekly basis at places where it isn't warranted also fell from 44% to 39%. Consumers estimate they spent about $130 on tips they didn't think were necessary in the past year, down from $150 when the same question was posed in September of 2025. 66% of respondents said they even tipped a worker who provided poor service. But 42% of people said they were becoming comfortable skipping gratuities for certain services. Consumers in the survey said they were willing to pay higher prices instead of tipping. If given a choice, 56% of consumers are willing to pay more for meals and beverages to provide higher wages for workers and eliminate gratuities. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Sunday, June 14th issue of the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News. We read from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News every Sunday at 6 p.m. Your reader has been Jackie. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the National Enquirer. At 8 p.m., we have People Magazine. And at 9 o'clock, we have the New York Times Book Review. Stay tuned for these readings and more. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or questions, please stay with us. If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Zero, or a smart. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability.